Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.
The SparkFile podcast may contain profanity and other adult content.
Please use your discretion.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Welcome to the Spark File, your one-stop bubble bath for creative inspiration.
I'm Laura Camion.
And I'm Susan Blackwell. If you're joining us for the first time, you are so welcome. If you're joining us for the 20 millionth time, you are also welcome. You may be asking yourself, what exactly is a Spark File? Where do I get one? Ooh, what do I file in it? These are such good questions, and we have got answers.
A Spark File is a place where you consistently collect all your inspirations and your fascinations.
Here's the deal. We are makers who make all kinds of things.
If you're anything like us and you're making stuff all the time, or you want to be making stuff all the time, you know the wellspring of inspiration can run a little dry.
So we're on the lookout for fresh ideas, images, and inspiration that spark our creativity and pique our curiosity, things that inspire us to get up off our asses and make things like this podcast.
Or an autobiographical movie so raw, it's pleading for redemption.
Or a book for creatives that contains more sparks than pages.
Ooh, every episode we're going to reach into the Spark File and exchange some sparks. And from time to time, we're going to talk to some folks who spark us too.
And if you're not careful, you might just get your compass pointed towards true north. So without further ado, let's open up the Spark File. Baby Cam.
Blackwell, I'm so intrigued by your little hint there.
I always like to want to try to guess what yours is.
I feel like I might know what yours is.
Autobiographical film that and redemption. Autobiographical film? Autobiographical. The filmmaker made a film about themselves. All right. I don't know what it is, but we'll get to it.
Can't wait to hear, like, I have a book in mind, and I'm so curious to know.
Oh, good. We'll see if it is.
Okay.
Before we get started, I just want to share with you that I have had my friend Deaton Bell on my mind.
Deaton Bell.
Deaton Bell is for those of you who don't know Deaton Bell, he is a super creative creator, and he does this professionally for his job, right? So I just want to say this, and from this point into the future, I'm probably going to remind y'all of this a million times. Our aim on this podcast is to refill your wellspring of inspiration.
That's right.
It's not to make you feel like you have more to-dos. Now, if you want to create more, go for it, of course. But I know I personally get stressed out with like productivity articles, books, and podcasts. I think they're so worthwhile. But I also have this accompanying feeling, it feels like so much pressure to do those additional 3 steps just once a day to achieve the next steps on my career productivity or
my other steps.
Because I have steps.
Yes, you have steps on steps.
Yes. And so whenever there's like the suggestion of more, I'm like, eek, and my shoulders rise up. But this podcast really is a source for people to restock their creative fish ponds. So if you're like Deaton and you're already wildly creative, perhaps you're even professionally creative, I hereby institute the Deaton exception, which is you get to listen to this podcast in any way you like. You just let it wash over you and refill you. Just fucking enjoy it, and you be refueled and refreshed. And there's nothing you have to do except that.
Fuck yeah.
And you know what? If you don't even want to do that, you don't
It's
have
so
to do that.
true. It's like, for those of you old enough to remember, say, an actual file cabinet, it's just like you're poking through that cabinet, looking for something that might interest you. If you like it, pull it out, run with it. But you don't have
Just
to use
take
anything.
the pressure off.
It's all in there.
Busman's holiday is what I don't want people to feel like. Do you know what the phrase busman's holiday means, listeners? It means if you're a professional bus driver, when you go on vacation, you don't want to get on a bus. You want nothing else.
You don't.
But it made me think of our friend. We had the conversation with Lin-Manuel Miranda, and he was talking about how they are just like Freestyle Live Supreme. Those improvisers are just human garbage disposals, and they're just taking stuff in so that when it comes time to create and to spit, they have something that can come out. And that's all we're asking you to do, Deaton. It's just take it in. If something sparks you, great.
Did our podcast stress Deaton out?
I think maybe it was a little bit like, because he's a professional. And I thought about all the other professional creatives.
It's like one more thing to do. You know what? I'm going to tack on to this because I have had friends. I see them now. They're like, oh my God, I'm sorry. I haven't.
Like it's a responsibility.
And I'm like, you don't have to do anything.
You don't have to do anything.
Mm-mm.
Just lay back and enjoy
That's
it.
right. That's right.
But if you do have a bug to make something, dance something, paint something, craft something, storytell something, poem something, you can rock on.
Do it.
But don't feel like this is another thing to put on your to-do list. And that is what I am calling the Deaton exception, which is also the name of my new spy thriller, The Deaton Exception. Now available wherever you get paperback
It's
books.
like a Patterson. What's his name? John Patterson.
I know exactly who
you know what
James
I mean?
Patterson.
I
know exactly who you're talking about.
Yes, James Patterson. Yes,
And
the
ads
Deaton
on
exception.
the subway ads.
Yes. There you go,
there you
Susan. That's where you'll
I just
be
wanted
next.
to clear that up.
I can't wait for that book.
Y'all keep waiting. Listen to this podcast however you want to listen to it. Is there any business that you want to add?
No. I want to hear your spark. I'm excited.
Okay. Oh, I will say this. We're super excited. It's been announced, and by the time this hits the waves, registration will be open for the Spark File New Year's 2020 Creativity Workshop and Live podcast. It's going to be in New York City on January 4th and 5th.
Hell yeah.
It's going to be so fun. It's going to be a lot of fun, creativity and making and workshopping, and it's going to be capped off by an amazing live recording of the Spark File podcast. So
it's going to be fucking cool. It's going to be fun. It's going to be loaded with goodness.
It's going to be
juicy
lit.
That's a word I have never actually used in a sentence.
Say it now, Camion. Say it now.
Why you torture me?
Say that
It's
workshop.
going to be lit.
Thank you, Camion.
Remember when I said I didn't have any business? I lied. I wanted to also do a little shout out to a man named Andy Berkey.
Mm-hmm.
Andy wrote to us on Instagram and was like, hey, I'm just a random guy, like super humble.
Wait a minute. Wrote to us?
Wrote to us.
I didn't see this.
Well, you need to get on our Instagram and read these.
Okay.
We need a better system, by the way, of like who's read what.
We don't have a system.
We have no systems. So you get what you get.
Okay, so what did he say?
So he was saying like, hey, also like he's on the West Coast. I think forgive me, Andy, but I think he's like Oregon or Washington. Okay. But he's a total maker. He makes these incredibly beautiful, like neo-Gothic, religious, like inside of a church when you see...
Is it a lectern? Is it?
No,
is
it's that whole thing. I'm showing Susan a picture right now.
You mean
we'll
that pedestal? That's a lectern.
And all this on the wall. All of that.
The whole installation.
All that. And it is so beautiful. His work is gorgeous. And he and we'll post some of it after this
Is
episode,
it like
so you know what we're talking about.
religious? I don't know what it's called. There must be a name for
There
it.
must be a name for it, which is why I hesitated to share, because I thought I don't have all the words, but it is religious. But essentially, imagine going into a church and just when it's all the like ornate
Decor.
shadow boxes.
I don't think they call it decor.
they don't call it decor.
But
I'm
he
sure.
carves those and makes those and paints those and does those.
That's right, all of it.
And does he listen to our podcast while he does
Susan,
it?
he does. And he works alone in his garage. And he's
Oh.
like, I'm just out there in the garage and I'm
Andy
making this
Berkey.
stuff. I'm like, so Andy and I had, I think it was Saturday, we had a lovely little Instagram conversation back and forth because my dad was a woodworker. And I was just like, every time I see that stuff, I'm like kicking myself for not having paid more attention and learned more from my dad while I could.
Yeah, yeah.
And I see that and I'm just like, that is craftsmanship. That's
Beautiful.
artistry. Yeah. So we'll post some stuff. Andy,
Love
how you
the
doing?
idea that we're going, all our profanity is going into Andy Berkey's ears as his hands make the most beautiful religious
That's
artifacts.
right. I think Andy, granted, it was a quick conversation, but I don't think the cussing phases him. He might even
Clearly.
like it. He and his friends have a really cool T-shirt that I was like, hey, where did they get that? I might, if I could dig a little further, I could find out. But it was like, you're weird. I like you.
Oh,
And that's what the T-shirt is. And I was like, I just feel like
Andy
you
Berkey,
know,
keep up the
he's-
good creating.
it like in the circle.
Nice. I love
Yeah.
that.
So that was my business.
I
My
love
extra
that.
bit of business.
A little shout out to Andy Berkey and his fine making. Should we get into this?
We should. I need to know, what is this creativity book?
Okay. The my Spark title is Just Do It. And sources for this Spark.
What?
Just do it, Cams.
Is Nike a source?
Nope. Nike is not a source, and neither are they a sponsor.
Yet.
The sources
Yet.
for my Spark include a book by Anne Lamott called Bird by Bird, some instructions on writing in life. Cammy took a
I
sip
just
of water.
took a sip, but I'm screaming inside.
And
I
she-
love Anne Lamott.
Yes, and an article in the New York Times by Dave Pogue.
Yay!
I think
I'm going to sit back and relax.
relax.
This one.
I think the very first time that this that the name Anne Lamott was shared with me, it was shared by my then mother-in-law, Betty Holt. So Betty is an awesome human being and an artist, and she gave me her copy of Anne Lamott's book, Bird by Bird. And I have treasured this book. It is filled with my highlighting and Betty's notes and bookmarks from both of us and little scribbles in the margins. And I got into this habit every time Anne Lamott says something sparkish in the book of putting this little paper Post-it tab that sticks out to mark the sparkish passage. So there
on.
are all of these little Post-it paper tabs sticking out of the side of the book so I can make my way back to the sparks. But because Anne Lamott says so many brilliant things, there are so many tabs sticking out of the side of the book. It looks like my copy of Bird by Bird totally needs a shave.
Oh my God. It's like a stubbly leg.
It's got a little beard.
Little beard trim.
Amazing.
Just trim. No, that's exactly what I imagined and what I pictured as you were describing that.
Yeah.
Honestly. Because
So
she
sweet.
says so many things.
Yeah.
You're just like, tag it, tag it.
Yeah, and it's while this beautiful, kind, wonderful woman, Betty Holt, was the first person who shared this book with me, since then I have shared it with so many other individuals. So I wanted to go big and share it with y'all.
Do it.
And share
Get
some
that
of these
book.
sparks. I will say that this book is chock-a-block with
It's
sparks. And I'll
cray,
just be offering you a sampling. I cannot recommend this book highly enough. And while it is aimed at writers, I think it has a lot to offer makers and human
Yes.
beings. In fact, throughout the course of this spark, I'm going to use those words interchangeably. Writers, makers, creators, I really do think it's for everybody. So you've read this book.
I have read that book. I have tagged my own copy.
You have your own hairy copy.
I do. I have a hairy copy of Bird by Bird.
It is crazy.
I read it, and then I also got the audio version.
Same.
And I was like walking around the city, just like hearing her read it.
It's delightful.
Which was also amazing.
Yeah, it's really good. So let's jump in. For instance, there's this passage where she's writing about her father, who is also a writer, and she writes, He could go any place he wanted with a sense of purpose. One of the gifts of being a writer, maker, creator is that it gives you an excuse to do things, to go places and explore. Another is that writing motivates you to look closely at life as it lurches by and tramps around. I think that this is so true for any maker. It gives you an excuse to get up and get out and reach out to people and engage.
That's right.
Later on in the book, she has this whole little chapter on calling around, how writing gives you a great reason to reach out to people and find out things. Now, this book was written before the internet boomed. So now I think you could find out the name of the little wire thingy on the top of a champagne bottle. You would just Google it. But before the internet, she suggested calling around. And in the act of calling wine-loving friends or even a winery to learn what that little wire thingy is actually called, you may also run into some tasty sparks. And she's right. And that is still true, internet or not.
That's right.
Yeah. So for us, for example, this podcast has given us such a great excuse to use her words, to call around and engage with other artists, to interview them, to consult with them, to learn from them. It's so great to have an excuse to call old friends and learn like what their collaborative writing practice was like, or all different sorts of things. So I love that. And I find it to be so true. Making gives you a reason to engage with people, to get people together in a room, talking about things of mutual interest, maybe rehearsing or devising or making something together.
That's right. It's purposeful. And I mean, I don't want to put a negative spin on it. It's negative but positive. But it's like your cover. Like if you're feeling awkward for any reason, you're like, it's research. I'm doing research, so
and it's true.
I'm curious, and I'm doing research on something. So you can go about your business doing whatever you want because you have a golden ticket.
It's
called
true.
Research.
It's your cover. Using creativity as an excuse to do things. Also, I have to say, it makes me personally braver. I overcome my fear and my introversion when I'm reaching out to others on behalf of some creative project. Creative projects and being an artist in general, for me, you called it cover, but for me, it's like a superhero costume and I can put it on and it really does make me stronger and braver and bolder to do things I would not do. to try things, to reach out to people I would not reach out to. But hey, I got the cape, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
The cape's on.
These are Anne's words. Instead of being scared all the time, you detach, watch what goes on, and consider it creatively. Instead of feeling panicked by those lowlifes on the subway, you notice all the details of their clothes and bearing and speech. Maybe you never quite get to the point where you think, so that's what a gun looks like from this end. But you take it all in as a child would without the atmospheric smog of most grown-up vision. Now, I think what she's talking about there is it's a way of moving through the world and perceiving the world, even things that may be scary or distasteful or dark sparks, or you can just sort of like move through the world and be a garbage disposal.
You know what? I can't help but think of my friend Corey Pryor. She used to say this to me, and it's a similar mindset. She would just say, it's all information. So it really, it depersonalizes it. It emotionalizes it. So as you're observing, whether it be your boss or your friend or whoever, it's all just information. So what Anne's talking about is like disconnecting, observing from afar. Oh, interesting. That's what a gun looks like. I've not seen a gun before, as opposed to the rush of panic and adrenaline, et cetera. But there's a real skill in that it's very calming, it's soothing, and it enables you to just simply observe.
And like hoover it up so that you can use it.
That's right. Because if it's too emotionally charged, you might not be able to really retain it. Ooh. So thank you, Anne.
Thanks, Anne. So here's another set of gems. Anne has a lot to say about gathering sparks. She says, I took notes on people around me, in my town, in my family, in my memory. I took notes on my own state of mind, my grandiosity, the low self-esteem. I wrote down all the funny stuff I overheard. I learned to be like a ship's rat, veined ears trembling, and I learned to scribble it all down. She's harvesting sparks.
She is.
She's getting it all down.
She's got characters. She's got dialogue. She's
Yeah.
got all of it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
In another part of the book, she describes the writer as the person who is standing apart, like the cheese in The Farmer in the Dell, standing there alone, but deciding to take a few notes. Like us, she stresses that while a spark may seem absolutely indelible, like it could never evaporate, these little gems, these little gifts, these little sparks, these little goldfish do swim away. I never had kids, but Anne Lamott and my ex-mother-in-law, Betty, did. And Betty underlined this passage in Anne's book. When a child comes out of your body, it arrives with about a fifth of your brain clutched in its little hand, like those babies born clutching IUDs. So for any number of reasons, it's only fair to let yourself take notes. She's all about capturing sparks. And the way Anne takes notes is on index cards. At least she did at the writing of this book, she keeps index cards and pens all over her house. She has them in the glove compartment of her car. She has them in her back pocket when she takes her dogs for a walk. That way, when a spark comes to her, whether it's internally or something externally, she's ready to capture it. So if you're listening to our voices and you haven't made your spark file yet, don't just take our word for it. Listen to your wise Auntie Anne Lamott and get it down. She said that eventually she throws many of her index cards away after she's either used the spark on the card or they're no longer interesting to her. Like if she sees one, she said they're like around her house. So they're like these little flurries. And she says if she sees one and she's like, I don't remember what that was, or she'll just toss it away, which is, sort of what I do when my sparks, after they're spent, I just delete them out of my spark file, which I don't think we've ever really talked about before.
Wow.
Yeah.
You totally delete.
Well, for instance, if I've taken a spark and I've made an episode of this podcast with it,
Yeah.
then
you're like, I'm good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like I have fully explored it
Yeah. And let it go.
to the extent of my desire, and then I let it go.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think she's also referring to like pruning a little bit.
Yeah.
So like, well, this no longer has the charge that it once had for me.
Yeah.
So let it go.
Yeah.
Onward.
Yeah.
Wow.
Get it, Anne Lamott.
She's so smart.
So, Anne recommends when people don't know, she talks a lot about like where this book is so rich. I'm just jumping around.
I'm loving it. I love that book so much.
I'm just sharing. These are just like
a
some
little bedtime
top
story for
level.
me.
Just lay back there.
Anne Lamott.
You have to get this book. It is so good if you're listening to the sound of my voice. There's a section about where to start and how to write. So Anne recommends when people don't know where to start writing or making or creating, that they start with their childhood, which I think is a fantastic place to start.
Genius.
So rich. She says, plug your nose and jump in and write down all your memories as truthfully as you can. She quotes in the book the great writer Flannery O'Connor, who says, anybody who has survived childhood has enough information about life to last him the rest of his days, which I totally believe is true.
It is.
When I work with students who are about 15, like if they're in that like 14, 15, I'm like, you all have, if you stopped writing about your life experience past this age, you would still have so much to draw on. You have been through so much.
So much.
Yeah.
Plenty.
Anne Lamott tweeted back in 2012, you own everything that happened to you. Tell your stories. If people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better. Which I couldn't agree with more, Anne Lamott.
That's what you get.
I want that stitched on a pillow. That is the best. If people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better. And this passage has really guided me through much of my creativity. If your childhood was less than ideal, you may have been raised thinking that if you told the truth about what really went on in your family, a long, bony white finger would emerge from a cloud and point at you while a chilling voice thundered, "We told you not to tell." And I was like, yeah, there is that fear that if you tell what went on, something terrible is going to happen to you. You're going to burst into flames. You're going to be disowned. And then I went on and wrote it anyway. Told those stories anyway. In another wonderful chapter on finding your voice, she talks about how she asks her students to quickly scribble down why they want to write. And over they say, in effect, I will not be silenced again.
Oof.
Cams, you know that I have struggled since I was little with what I call this invisible cork in my throat that I experienced it from the time I was little, where I just couldn't bring myself to say more challenging things.
Yeah.
And I remember I would do this thing where I would be like, okay, I'm going to say what I need to say. I'm going to count down from 5 and then I'm going to say it. And I would go, in my mind, I would go 5, 4, 3. Okay, I'm going to count down from 5. And I kept resetting and I couldn't get the cork out of my throat. And now that the cork is out, I don't want to be silenced again either by others or myself. And I want that freedom and flow of self-expression that she is talking about.
That's right.
She says, we write to expose the unexposed. If there is one door in the castle you have been told not to go through, you must. Most human beings are dedicated to keeping the door shut, but the writer's job is to see what's behind it, to see the bleak, unspeakable stuff, and turn the unspeakable into words. Anne Lamott, if you're listening, I want to make out with her so hard. She's so good.
I just want her on the podcast.
Oh,
but only if you promise not to make out.
Oh, I would be so respectful.
Good to know.
God.
Good to know.
She's like a dream. She's a dream
amazing.
guest. I've actually thought when I was preparing for the Spark, I actually had that thought.
Fantasy.
And I
guest.
was like, it couldn't possibly, she wouldn't dare. She wouldn't possibly.
Let's manifest it.
All right.
Honestly, let's take a moment.
Let's turn that around. Let's Oprah that shit.
It's going to happen. Anne Lamott. On
this podcast.
Can you imagine?
Great. I can. Now I can.
Okay. It's gonna happen.
I think she would be the BEST.
Incredible. Incredible.
She goes on to say, and I think this is such good advice. Try to write, make, create in a directly emotional way instead of being too subtle or oblique. Don't be afraid of material or your past. Write straight into the emotional center of things. Write toward vulnerability. Don't worry about appearing sentimental. Worry about being unavailable. Worry about being absent or fraudulent. Risk being unliked. Tell the truth as you understand it. If you're a writer, you have a moral obligation to do this, and it is a revolutionary act. Truth is always subversive. Yes,
Word.
Sirens. Yes, New York City. This reminded me actually of Julianne Moore. When Julianne Moore was saying, my fears are more about like physical harm. I'm not afraid of feelings. And I was like, she's figured out something there. Julianne Moore has figured out something there.
I think that's a theme that we're finding with a lot of guests that we
What's
talk
true?
to, actually. Like it's being comfortable with discomfort, making friends with fear,
Yes.
making friends with
Whether it's Lin-Manuel Miranda shitting himself before he performs, or Alex Hanel, climbing El Capitan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Like, that's a feeling.
That's a
and
feeling.
I can keep going anyway.
Yeah.
I can have that feeling and move right through it.
And she's saying, write, create, make, right into the center of it, which I love. This is just like, I'm just serving you a volley of just like
up.
throwing gems. Anne writes brilliantly about breaking down anything you want to make or write or do into short assignments. So you may have which we also totally ascribe to, you may have a giant thing you want to write or make or do, but she reminds us, all I have to do is write down as much as I can see through a 1-inch picture frame. She says she even has a 1-inch picture frame on her desk to remind her of short assignments. And she says when she's struggling under the weight of the world or the project, she remembers to pick up that 1-inch picture frame and figure out a 1-inch piece of her story to tell, one small scene, one memory, one exchange.
This is so key.
It's
This is so key.
critical.
How many times do we talk to people who, when we get to talking about their greatest dreams, hopes, wishes, it's a big, big idea.
Big.
And it's followed immediately, but with almost a stream of consciousness, like every single challenge that is between me and that big thing. And
Yeah.
it comes pouring out of them. And I don't know what to do because blah, 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 blah. And you're like, well, sure.
1 inch by 1 inch.
That's right. You
Yeah.
just are going to take one step today
Yeah.
and one step tomorrow.
Yeah, I was working with a coaching client recently who actually has given me permission to share this anecdote with you all, because when I coach with people, of course, it is confidential. But you all remember our sweet friend of the podcast, Celia Keenan Bolger.
Celia.
When we chatted with Celia on the podcast, she said that she was 100% an interpretive artist. And then after that conversation, she actually circled back to me and asked if I would coach her, that she felt like generally she might have some things she wanted to say and share, and that specifically she had this upcoming keynote that she was going to give and she wanted to prepare for it. So if you follow Celia on Instagram, you might have enjoyed one of her, she calls them pancakes. She does these sort of like walk and talks where she shares something she's been working on in her life and where she's at with it.
So cool.
Yeah. And it's Instagram, and when it expires, it goes away. So it's just like it lives, it breathes, it's gone. And I was like, Celia, you've already been making and writing, and you're doing it with your pancakes. And those are the seedlings. So I was reminded of Anne Lamott's short assignments. When you are starting something new, like say you want to write a keynote that you're going to deliver, and you're aiming at 60 or 90 minutes of you on a stage, sharing ideas you've generated. If you've never delivered a 90-minute keynote, that can feel completely daunting and overwhelming. But short assignments can totally save the day. So the short assignment that Celia committed to was something like 6 new pancakes once a week for the coming 6 weeks. Right?
Perfect.
She was already doing it.
Perfect.
And sometimes she'd get them done right under the wire. Like she was supposed to get one done a week, with Sunday being the end of the week. And she'd get it done at like 10:41 on Sunday before the week ended.
Yes,
but
goal
she got them.
accomplished.
She got them done. And then she can take those pancakes. She can transcribe them. She can use them as the foundation for this keynote that she will eventually give.
Amazing.
In the
Amazing.
in the words of this writer, E.L. Doctorow, writing a novel is like driving a car at night. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way.
Word.
And Anne adds, you don't have to see where you're going. You don't have to see your destination or everything you will pass along the way. You just have to see 2 or 3 feet ahead of you. Anne says, this is right up there with the best advice about writing or life I have ever heard. And I have to concur. That is a gem. Thank you, Anne Lamott. Thank you, E.L. Doctorow. And thank you, Celia Keenan Bolger. This is actually the chapter where we come to understand the story behind the title of Anne's book, Bird by Bird. When they were kids, her older brother, who was 10 years old at the time, had a report that was due the next day on birds, and he had 3 months to write it. But it was now the night before, and he hadn't even begun. I always imagine it was a summer project that he was supposed to work on it over the summer. And he was sitting at their kitchen table surrounded by unopened books on birds and paper and pencil, and he was close to tears. And their father, who was also a writer, sat down beside him and put his arm around Anne's brother's shoulder and said, bird by bird, buddy. Let's take it bird by bird. And I think that's true for Anne Lamott's brother, and it's true for Celia's keynote, and it's true for this podcast, and it's true for Lin-Manuel writing Hamilton, and it's true for the TV pilot you want to write or the room you want to decorate. It's just bird by bird. It's just one short 1 inch by 1 inch assignment after the other.
Love it.
Yeah.
Bird by bird, baby.
By bird. Here's some more assorted gems. Anne Lamott said something in her book that has rung like a bell in my head ever since I read it. And it is this: you don't always have to chop with the sword of truth. You can point with it too. As a teacher, as a coach, as a partner, as a collaborator, as a family member, I love this so much. It's about, you can be honest and compassionate. And I just want to share that with all the listeners, especially those in teaching and leadership roles. You don't always have to chop with the sword of truth. You can point with it too. Another gem. All good stories are out there waiting to be told in a fresh, wild way. What you have to offer is your own sensibility, maybe your own sense of humor or insider pathos or meaning. All of us can sing the same song, and there will still be 4 billion different renditions. This reminds me of one of the core tenets of this podcast, take it and make it. And to quote Stephen Sondheim, anything you do, let it come from you, then it will be new.
That's exactly right. We talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
There's some fear around like this story's already been told, but not in your voice, not by you.
Yeah.
Because as long as you're being authentic, you are the only one who can tell that story in that way.
Yes, 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 yes.
Love it.
Anne Lamott quotes another writer, Annie Dillard, as saying, I love this, Cams. I love this. Day by day, you have to give the work before you all the best that you have, not saving up for later projects. If you give freely, there will always be more. I absolutely love it. I totally believe in
awesome.
it. But I struggle because I do have fears. Like, I do have fears about, well, if I give my best, well, this is like a lesser project. This isn't like a premier project. And am I going to give my very best?
I should
to
hold
this?
back.
I should hold that back. But it reminded me of another spark I had filed away that I was saving for another episode of this podcast. But in the spirit of the moment, I'm going to go ahead and share it. I'm sharing it. When the New York Times' Dave Pogue asked readers to share their best advice they'd ever received, one of them wrote, "Don't pickle things." That line was brought to us by a reader named Sam Singer's mother, and it means if you have something special, use it now. Serve daily meals on your good china. Wash your hands with the luxurious soap you received as a housewarming gift. Drink that bottle of amazing wine right away. Don't save things for future use because who knows what the future looks like. I think this goes for creating too. Don't pickle things. Don't save them for later. Use your good stuff now.
Don't pickle it because you will have more good stuff.
That's what we were saying to
There's
Gavin
more
Creel.
good stuff coming.
Gavin Creel, I think, feared that he has this big idea. He's got this big idea that he's making, and he's afraid. He said he had this magical thinking fear that once this big idea was up and out of him and realized that he'd probably die. And I was like, let me offer you a different possibility. Once that's up and out of you, the experience of making it and having it up and out of the conduit is actually going to clear the way, spark you, and inspire you for several other
More
creative things
things
that will bubble up
right
to the
behind
surface.
it.
That's right. That's right.
They're trapped in there.
That's
Let
right.
them out.
So I'm using this piece of advice, but I'm still going to do that spark one day.
Yeah, dude,
more
that's
fully.
a good one.
Don't pickle it.
Don't pickle it.
So in conclusion, so I had this student who attended one of our creativity workshops. And after the workshop concluded, she said, I want to learn more specifically about writing. What books would you recommend? So as I always do, I recommended Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott and another book that I won't mention because I am saving that as another spark for another day.
Pickling.
I love such an accusation. Pickling. So about a month went by and the student emailed me and said, okay, I finished those books. What should I read now? And I said, pause on reading about writing. Now it's time to write. Anne Lamott tells the story about her father, who also taught writing to the incarcerated men at San Quentin. He taught them and his daughter to put a little bit down on paper every day, to be bold and original and let themselves make mistakes. Anne said, but while he helped the prisoners and me to discover that we had a lot of feelings and observations and memories and dreams and God knows opinions we wanted to share, we all ended up just the tiniest bit resentful when we found the one fly in the ointment that at some point we had to actually sit down and write. She says,
Dang it.
I wish I had a secret I could let you in on. Some formula my father passed on to me in a whisper just before he died. Some code word that has enabled me to sit at my desk and land flights of creative inspiration like an air traffic controller. But I don't. But I will say there is a passage early in Anne Lamott's book that I have tabbed and highlighted again and again with each fresh reading of this book. This passage at this point looks like a highlighter rainbow. It is what Anne Lamott's father kept saying to her. Do it every day for a while. Do it as you would do scales on the piano. Do it by prearrangement with yourself. Do it as a debt of honor. And make a commitment to finishing things. Or, as my former mother-in-law, the beautiful Betty Holt, wrote in the margin of Anne Lamott's beautiful book, just do it.
Yes.
Bird by bird.
Do it. Bird by bird.
So get into it, people. It's bird by bird.
Just do it.
Some instructions on writing in life by the insanely awesome Anne Lamott.
Oh,
that is my spark for you for today.
Good.
Gentle friends. Should we take a pee?
Pee break.
So Camion was peeing and I opened up Instagram like you do. And there's this quote from Anne Lamott from her account that says, what if you wake up someday and you're 65 or 75 and you never got your memoir or novel written, or you didn't go swimming in the warm pools and oceans all those years because your thighs were jiggly and you had a nice, big, comfortable tummy, or you were just so strung out on perfectionism and people pleasing that you forgot to have a big, juicy, creative life of imagination and radical silliness and staring off into space like when you were a kid. It's going to break your heart. Don't let this happen.
Do not let it happen.
Anne Lamott, bringing the wisdoms today.
Bring in the wisdom.
Cams, do you have a spark for me?
I got a spark for you, and I think I got a spark for Anne Lamott too. I really want to know what she thinks
Get
of
Anne
this.
Lamott on the horn.
Yes, after we discuss this topic, I think we need to circle back on.
We'll chat with her when we interview her.
That's right. That's right.
Great.
So the title of my spark today is The Improbable Redemption of Honey Boy.
Oh.
So Susan, I don't think I could have or would have ever described myself as a huge Shia LaBeouf fan. But there was a time, admittedly way back, that I did have an awareness of him as this up and coming sort of exciting talent, the kind of talent that like certain people have that gets the industry all a buzz, you know? And it's people like Leonardo DiCaprio, or maybe a young Robert Downey Jr. or Heath Ledger. There's a little bit of danger.
Yeah.
There's like an aliveness maybe, or unpredictability to their work that the directors and I think audiences kind of get amped about, you know?
Sure.
So he had that, I think. And it's kind of that not ultra trained actor, you know, the actor that's like completely in control of their every move, but a little bit more like a wild card.
Yeah.
So he had this quality, and I guess he was a working actor beginning at around age 10.
Yeah, he was.
He had a stand-up act in his in a club that his dad worked in at age 10. He described his shtick as little boy with an old man's mouth. And when you think about that, it's even more ironic that he then got cast in a Disney Channel show. Seems unlikely, but he did. He got cast in a Disney Channel show and became like a bona fide success at age 14 with the show Even Stevens. Now, I didn't watch that show. I think I was too old.
Yeah.
But I think it was like a modern day Dennis the Menace. And for the record, I didn't watch that show either because I think I was too young. But somewhere I was aware of both shows. But, you know, that sort of like rambunctious, good kid, but with a mischievous side.
Yeah. Little devil.
Yeah. Little devil. That's a good way of putting it. So I was aware of this buzz around Shia at that time. But the reason I really heard of him is because I watched the first 2 seasons of Project Greenlight.
Yes.
Which is, for those of you who don't know, is a documentary television series. It's a competition, really, to fund a first-time filmmaker and their movie, and then they would shoot the whole process of making that movie. And it was created by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, among many other people, and it first aired on HBO. So that show had a ton of buzz around it.
Yep. Because
of them, mostly. But also, I think, because it really was the first time, like, the general public could get, like, a sneak peek behind the curtain at sort of the movie making magic of it all.
I really love that show.
I did too.
Yeah.
I did too. So the good, the bad, the ugly, like it was all on display in that show. For its second season, they did something different where they selected a winning script and a winning director separately. Kind of think they actually wanted to amp up the tension and drama, which they didn't really need to do because there was plenty of drama.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing to like write and direct your own script, and it's another thing entirely to be handed a script and say, you're going to direct this.
Yes.
Regardless of your feelings of it, find something to love about it, find a perspective and a point of view and go for it.
Yeah.
So that's what they did for the second season. And it was a team of directors who won that season, Kyle Rankin and Ephraim Patel.
That's right. They co-directed it.
That's right. They co-directed. And the script they chose was The Battle of Shaker Heights.
Yep.
So on this show, you watch it all come together, the writing, the pre-production, the casting, the filming, and you basically see how difficult it is to direct a film. And I found it fucking fascinating.
Same here.
I loved it. But it was there that I encountered this Shia LaBeouf for the first time. On that show, they all got really excited about casting this Disney star in that movie, The Battle of Shaker Heights. So it was the movie that they were shooting within the TV show. So they cast him and they all get super amped about it. But after, you have a question.
He already starred in Holes at that point. Like it wasn't just the Disney show.
I think he had one other
he was
bigger credit.
Yeah.
But even that was Disney, right? So it's like he was a Disney star.
Fun side tangent. Side spark, not a spark.
If you're going to say, were you in the movie Holes?
I love the book Holes. It's a YA book. And do you know that book at all?
Only from that film.
I really like it. And and I like the film. And my friend Tom Schulteis, hi Tom, and Roger Bell and I call it the movie, the book, all of it. We call it buttholes. So the butt is silent, almost silent. We can't call it anything except buttholes.
Buttholes.
Yes.
Well, Shia had already starred in Buttholes.
There you go.
Okay. Fantastic. So you can see they were even more excited to get this kid on the show.
Yeah.
They just thought, it
was a coup. It was a casting coup.
Dollar signs. People are going to go see this movie. But after the show airs, they release the film, and they do this every time, which is probably why the show isn't still on.
Yeah.
The movie turns out to be a dud. I didn't see it. I don't think anyone else did. Nonetheless, that's how I heard the buzz about Shia. He definitely turned out to be the most memorable part of Project Greenlight, I think, of any of their seasons. Well, there were definitely memorable moments and memorable characters, but Shia LaBeouf is probably the only name that I remember from it, right?
Besides the producers.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
So anyhow, he left that.
And J-Lo. J-Lo does make an appearance when she was dating Ben Affleck.
She does.
She sure visits the set and walks through.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
She had on a crop sweater, and I was like, wow, just on a casual
memorable
day out, like to just be rocking a crop sweater.
Because you can.
Because
when
you're
J-Lo.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So J-Lo, Ben Affleck, Shia LaBeouf.
And Shia.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So like I said, I wouldn't say I was ever a huge fan, but I didn't have any particular disdain for him at that time, But slowly over time, things happened. And his fame grew. First of all, he started working with big directors. He worked with Steven Spielberg, Michael Bay, Oliver Stone, Robert Redford. He starred in several blockbusters, from Transformers to Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Ball. See, it's that
Skull. Not crystal ball.
I've got ball here.
It's skull.
I'm kidding. Don't fight me on this.
Okay.
Crystal skull. Sure. Ball skull. He was hired to be like a young Harrison Ford.
Right.
So if that tells you anything about like the kind of energy, that had to have been a highly coveted role.
Kids got heat. Kids got juice. Yep.
And and he got it. The movie bombed, sadly, even given all of the people involved. So none of those were very big with the critics. So he started to dabble in some more art house type films. He starred in a Lars von Trier movie called Nymphomaniac, which had a lot of controversy, or perhaps tried to stir up a lot of controversy in regard to whether or not the sex scenes were real, etc. I don't think anyone took enough of an interest, frankly, for it to really pay off in the ticket sales they were hoping for. But his behavior just started to become increasingly erratic. He made a critically acclaimed short film called HowardCantor.com, and it debuted at the Cannes Film Festival. Then they posted it online for the rest of the world to see for free. Almost immediately, people noticed that the work was flat out lifted from another artist's work. He took the story, he took the dialogue straight from a comic by another author named Daniel Clowes.
Oh, that's a very famous graphic novelist.
Yeah. So he took it straight from a work of his, a really personal work. And then
with credit?
No. No credit.
There's a fine line between a spark of inspiration and plagiarism.
No, this was flat out plagiarism.
Wow.
So people jumped on him.
Yeah.
He tried to play sort of a naive artist sort of card, and people were like, no. Wow. So then he issues a formal apology, and even part of the apology was words borrowed from yet another person, like someone on Reddit. It's like he researched apologies on Reddit and just took.
Oh, no.
And so things started to go downhill for Shia here. So after this time, like I don't know when his drinking had begun to be an issue for him, but around this time it just gets worse and worse. He gets drunk. He refuses to leave a Walgreens in Chicago.
Like you do. He gets banned from an LA restaurant for peeing on the wall.
Oh no. Like you do. He chases down a homeless man and demands that he give him his bag of McDonald's.
Oh no.
Like he's just losing it, right? He was cast in the Broadway show Orphans, and he's booted out of that for being too difficult to work with.
Oh, gosh.
He starts to get in trouble with the law, like disorderly conduct, public intoxication, assault with a deadly weapon, bar fights. He gets videotaped screaming and threatening his girlfriend. So he's filmed in public.
Oh, boy.
This might have been where I started to notice my own personal, anti-Shia feelings coming up. But it doesn't stop here. He was forcibly removed from a Broadway performance of Cabaret for allegedly smoking inside the theater and causing a disturbance. He wore a paper bag on his head that read, "I am not famous anymore," to the Berlin Film Festival in 2014. And he starts creating some very bizarre performance art pieces. Have you heard about these at all?
No.
So
the paper bag sounds like a piece of performance art, frankly.
Well, I think it was an extension of this gallery show that he did. Essentially, the gallery show, it was in LA, and it was called #IamSorry. And this whole piece consists of him sitting alone in a room with a bag over his head, and one by one, people are allowed to enter, only one person at a time.
This is very Maria Abramovic.
And and they can do whatever they want to him. A statement publicizing the project said, "Shia LaBeouf is very sorry, sincerely sorry. He will be in situ at 7354 Beverly Boulevard for the duration. Implements will be provided."
What does that mean?
What does that mean? So this whole thing brought its own scandal when he claimed that a woman raped him during her time in the room with him. The promoters said they stopped it as soon as they realized what was going on. But despite the comment, like, implements will be provided, they later claimed, like, we never said that you could do whatever you want to him. But that sort of was the implication of the whole thing. He's sorry and he's ready to take his punishment. Whoa. Is really the takeaway.
Okay.
But the rape story is really, really interesting and a side spark on its own, because essentially, there was a woman who came with her boyfriend. The boyfriend stayed outside the door as she went inside. And according to Shia, she used something to whip his legs for 10 minutes, presumably giving him an erection. And then she climbed on.
Wow.
And he says that the act went on and people like were buzzing about it, like outside the door, and then it traveled on down the line because there was a line of people around the block
Waiting.
to see him.
Yeah.
His girlfriend happened to be in that line. So the word gets to her that he's in there, with a woman and they're having sex. When she gets her turn in the room, of course, she's got a million questions for him and he can't explain because part of it is that he doesn't speak in this room. So I think this is its own provocation and interesting dilemma because after that, a lot of people came out believing him, not believing him, and it really makes you sort of question where we are now with the Me Too movement and our emphasis on believing victims, male or female. But you have to also then acknowledge, like, people are trained to think that men or boys want it no matter what. And you're just like, I think it causes you to grapple with a lot of stuff. Just because you put on an art show doesn't mean that anyone, can do anything.
Yeah.
And maybe it doesn't occur to you that you have to put a sign on the wall that says you cannot rape the artist or you cannot physically harm the artist. So that's an interesting little side note of his experiences, but you can kind of see he's starting to struggle, to say the least. There are things that he's doing publicly that are kind of adding up to a car crash, a train wreck kind of thing. And it did all end literally with a crash. He was driving drunk with his co-star in his car. He crashed the car.
Oh.
He broke his wrist, but he more noteworthy is that he got into an altercation with the cop.
Oh.
He spits on the cop. He is filmed like spewing racial slurs. He essentially then is sent to rehab. His choices are rehab or jail because this is the third time. It's like a third strike and you're out. So you're going to finish rehab this time or you're going to jail. Those are your choices. So let me pause right here and remind ourselves that Shia is certainly not alone in the child actors who eventually lost their way category. Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan, Brad Renfro, Corey Haim, Corey Feldman, Demi Lovato, Dustin Diamond, could probably argue James Dean, many, many others. So many of them either destroy themselves, become irrelevant, quote unquote, and get out of Hollywood completely, or try to claw their way back in, but they're not fully healed. Like maybe we continue to watch them on reality shows as their troubles are trotted out as entertainment. Sometimes it ends in absolute tragedy, and sometimes it just drags on in enduring pain and struggle. So he's certainly not unique in that sense. And that brings up a ton of questions for me. Like, where are all the adults that helped them get to where they are? I assume and want to assume that they tried to help these kids, as they veered into trouble, but you can only help people who want to be helped.
Yeah, but then you look at somebody like, I think of Amy Winehouse, where it's questionable, was that helpful and supportive? It seemed like the people that were around her that set boundaries and said no were sort of ushered on out of her life.
That's right.
And
when you have fame and money, it's very easy,
it's very tricky
to build the entourage around you and
serves
you
current desires.
That's right.
Yeah.
So here we are with Shia. He gets sent to rehab. It's his third time. It's all or nothing. These are his options, rehab or jail. So perhaps begrudgingly, he commits to his therapy, and he calls rehab head camp. By the way, cute. And he begins work with a particular therapist who diagnoses him with post-traumatic stress disorder. And that therapist has him do exposure therapy where they record all their conversations and he writes everything down.
Yeah.
So they recorded everything and he wrote it all down. These recordings and writings eventually become a screenplay called Honey Boy, which eventually becomes a movie, which is out in theaters right now.
Oh, yes.
Yes. It stars Lucas Hedges as a young Shia and Shia LaBeouf as his own father.
Oh my gosh.
That gives me the chills because we'll get there. But
Wow.
so in a People magazine article, Shia said, I was in a court-ordered rehab facility and it was part of sussing out my past, flashlight to your soul, trying to get to know myself like a shedding of skin in a way. He adds that writing the script was part of his recovery process and a way of dealing with unresolved pain. So the first part of the movie was written during the rehab stint. He hadn't seen or talked to his dad in at least 7 years.
Yeah, when you were talking, I was like, if I remember correctly, it's always been portrayed that he was super close to his mom and you never really heard about a father.
Well, I don't know if that was part of a PR narrative, but he actually lived with his dad in a motel, $40 a night motel. His dad was paid to be a chaperone. He didn't live with his mom. She had a job. She had a life elsewhere. So he hadn't seen his dad in like 7 years when he was in rehab. He got out and at the urging of his director, Alma Harrell, who was really, really, really good. Alma Harrell. She said, you need to go see your father. He did. He recorded that reunion. He wrestled with that. And then he gave the script an ending after having reuniting with his dad.
When you say Alma Harrell is really good, you mean she's a
very talented director, which I'll talk about a little bit more. But it was at her urging
that he reconciled with his father
to get the rest of it. So spoiler alert, if you plan on seeing the movie, you might want to pause here, go see it, and then come back to us. But I'll try not to say too much plot-wise.
I want to see this, yeah.
But, we're going to spill a little bit of the tea.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, Susan.
Yeah, I've got a ticket.
But there's so much to unpack about this movie. I mean, you and I have both written very personal work. Pieces, entire plays based on our own experiences and trauma and baggage, frankly, that we needed to examine, wanted to examine.
Yeah.
In Shia's case, I think it's really interesting because here we have a person who's lived like a far more public life than either of us. But he has a desire to explain perhaps why he is the way he is or why he ended up where he ended up. And he manages to do that in this film without shifting responsibility, without placing all the blame on his parents per se. I mean, we can make stuff up in our own minds, but they walk a very careful tightrope, a very, it's a balancing act that I think really gives credit to the direction, Alma Harrell, and Shia's writing, because I think it's a really rare skill to be able to humanize a villain and to make you feel compassion for a villain. And that's even harder when the villain is you.
Wow.
So kudos to Shia for that. So the plot of Honey Boy, according to Esquire, is, quote, a child actor and his law-breaking, alcohol-abusing father attempt to mend their contentious relationship over the course of a decade.
Wow.
Basically, we see this child actor, who we know is Shia. He's living in this crappy hotel with his dad. We learn that his dad is a former rodeo clown. He was trained in Commedia dell'arte. He's a Vietnam vet.
Wow.
He's an alcoholic. He's a drug addict. And now he's his son's paid chaperone.
Wow.
His only job is to get his son to and from the set.
Yeah.
And Shia pretty much does that himself.
Wow.
At age 10. So this character was intensely supportive of his son. He was fiercely jealous of his son. He was frustratingly dependent upon his son. He's a mix of unforgiving abuse and a pile of pain himself. It's a real exercise in empathy. I mean, my heart just broke for the child. And then it also broke for the dad. I mean, he just really, really did a good job with that. And the fact that Shia's
playing the dad.
Yeah, playing the role of his father.
Wow.
Talk about cleansing. So like I said, you and I have both written autobiographical things. I mean, you even played the role of my mother in Electra Speaks.
I did.
And like writing about my mom in a way that illustrated our home life or what life was like growing up in our house, it was hard because I also wanted to show her humanity and the complexities of being a human being. Like most people want to say, oh my God, your mom said that. She must have been a monster. And I would always explain, like, but she wasn't.
Yeah.
Like, I know that. I know my mom loved me. My mom was struggling with her own stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that Shia really illustrates that very well in this movie. Like the pain that our parents suffered, and they may still be dealing with it. They may be in the throes of it while they're trying to raise a child, and they may pass down that pain that they suffered. Not because they intend to, but just because it's the cycle. Hurt people, and damaged people, damage people.
Yeah.
And I think he did a really great job of showing that cycle.
God, this is fascinating.
So when I tell you more about Shia's dad in real life, you'll really understand, like, he didn't write this from a place of revenge. He had a very kind heart about it. In fact, Shia did.
Yeah.
Or his director did, like whoever edited it, some critics.
That's a real process. I mean, those feelings as he processed them, as they came up in prolonged exposure therapy, as he came to understand them, you sort of walk around those feelings and see them from a different vantage point.
That's right.
You can get to a place where you have, that it's not just anger, grief. You can get to a place where you have understanding and empathy.
That's right. And he had help doing it.
Yeah.
I think that really shows.
Help is helpful. Yeah.
Help is helpful. So in real life, his dad was an alcoholic, a drug addict. He was emotionally abusive. He was sometimes physically abusive. He was a registered sex offender.
Oh, no.
For trying to rape a girl who was underage.
Oh, no.
He went to jail for various things, including assault with a deadly weapon, selling drugs, etc.
Wow. And Shia is living with this in, day out.
That's
this is his core, I'm using quotes, source of support.
That's right.
In a $40 a night motel room.
That is correct. With a man who is proud of him,
so unstable,
jealous of him, angry with him.
Oh my gosh! So Shia comes by his challenges honestly. His life is very disordered.
Totally does.
Yeah.
But interestingly, and I credit the therapist he worked with, because after all of this, in the New York Times, Shia said, "My dad is a fighter, a survivor. He's some kind of cockroach. It's unbelievable how he's able to stay afloat. I can't believe he's still alive. He's a street poet. He's cowboy culture. He's Americana. He's a soldier. He's an artist. He's a comedian. He's a lover. He's a beautiful man."
Wow.
And I think that he probably had to, when you see his performance of his dad, his portrayal, I think he probably had to tap into his love for the man. Again, like if you play a monster like a monster,
yeah,
it's almost boring. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel, legit.
Yeah.
But when you are playing the heart of that human being who is hurting.
Yeah, it's a pretty standard. I think we've even talked about it on the podcast before. It's sort of like acting training 101. If you're playing I'm using quotey fingers, the villain of a piece, whether it's Shakespeare or Honey Boy, you're not playing a mustache twirling villain. You try to get inside the skin of the person and really understand what brought them to this place.
Yes.
The villain does not view themselves as a villain.
No. He just did it on like another level. Like I'm really proud of him and excited for him for how healing that must have been. Most importantly, he said this about the trip to go see his dad. He said, "We're done fighting with each other. I missed him terribly. We missed each other. Way more than I want to be right. I want my dad." And that reminded me of a speaker that I saw the other night, Mira Jacob. She's written several best-selling novels, but she's now written a graphic novel called Good Talk, which is about race conversations that she has with her 9-year-old son. And it was fascinating. Her son is of mixed race, so they have some really incredible question and answer sessions,
conversations.
from the mind of a child.
Yeah.
That entire topic is a spark for another day. But one thing that struck me about her talk was that she said she wrote over 80 stories for the book, including stories of politics and conversations with family members about politics, etc. And then she went back through and she deleted the scenes that were about vindication. Like any scene that she thought felt like was about her trying to prove her side or make herself look like the person in the right, she cut it.
Wow.
And of course it can be a great inspiration to write those stories down, by all means. Like, get them down on paper. You're lit up about it, write it.
Yeah. Get it up and out.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Up and out. But in the end, the more you include those stories of vindication, the less vindication you might earn. And I think Shia was really smart in this screenplay. Again, I don't know if it was him or his director or the editor or someone.
The process.
Yeah. And they removed any scenes that may have felt like vindication. They chose wisely. So they had a deeply complicated relationship, the kind of complicated mess that ensues when you succeed at something that one of your parents dreamt of doing.
Oh, boy.
And that hurts. You might hold yourself back because of that success. It comes with pain as well. So the film really brings up the question for me, like, do people deserve forgiveness? Does Shia's dad deserve it? Does Shia deserve it? The whole film walked that line. Like, it doesn't seem to be saying, like, it's not my fault. It doesn't seem to be asking for forgiveness. He managed to, like I said, make it not like he was shifting responsibility. In fact, he got the screenwriting award for it. And he ended up in his speech thanking the cop that had arrested him, that sent him, apologizing and thanking that cop.
Wow.
So it shows a little bit of progress as a human being. And I really think this movie is about evolution, not absolution. There are a lot of people writing about it like, well, this doesn't mean that he can just be a dick. And like, of course not. Of course not. But it is trying to explain how he got here and how he's trying to fix it, maybe with art itself. Mm-hmm. I think that it's also asking that question culturally. You'll see after you see the movie, but a lot of people, the conversation around it is, does making good art forgive all sins? I mean, I think in this day of Weinstein, it's not. No. The answer is no.
Yeah.
One of Shia's arrests for drunk driving, he was seen on the video making racist remarks. This film does not forgive that.
Yeah.
This film doesn't make it okay. I have no doubt that he did a good amount of healing through this process. And I think that helping the audience heal some of our own stuff is the real breakthrough for the film. It wasn't just a pity party for Shia. I think it went well beyond that.
Wow.
But there's also indications that there's still some work to do, that he and his dad still seem to be playing some real emotional games on each other. Shia said to The Hollywood Reporter, I went to Costa Rica and read him the script. I told him that someone else was going to be playing him, which was a feather in his cap, a person he really looked up to. I bluffed my way into getting him to sign the paperwork. Oh. And then after he signed the paperwork, I put it to him like, I'm playing you.
Wow.
And I was like, now Shia, don't make me regret this, dude. But his director, this wise woman who led this whole thing, she said, being an adult child of an alcoholic or being anybody that suffered from childhood trauma at a young age had their wires crossed when it comes to love and pain. It's a lifelong journey. Her father also struggles with alcoholism.
I was wondering, yeah.
She said, this film, you could say it's therapeutic, but really what it was is a very big opportunity to go into that room where all the trauma happened and see it from a different perspective.
Wow.
So what do we make of it? If you've got a trauma in your past that you've been struggling with, it might help you to write about it. It might be very freeing. Again, keep in mind that Shia had professional help guide him through this process.
Yes.
You might enlist a therapist to take you on that journey.
Yeah.
like I said, Susan and I have both written about autobiographical material. Sometimes it can be the full enchilada or just a single memory that you explore.
Or, as Linda Berry says, autobiography. Sometimes it's autobiographical with a sprinkling of fiction to make it, dramatic and Aristotelian in its arc.
That's right.
Yeah.
I also think that knowing yourself can help you really understand why certain themes or projects appeal to you. I think I mentioned in an earlier episode that I've written a screenplay about Patricia Douglas, the woman who was raped at the MGM party.
Right.
And I didn't go into detail about it at that time, but one thing that was really healing for me is that I looked at that story not just through the lens of what actually happened to her, but I filtered it through my own most painful realities. So my version of the story is not the story of the first rape claim that was filed in the Supreme Court. My story is a story about a young woman betrayed by the world, but most importantly, betrayed by her mother.
Yes.
So while the details in no way resemble my relationship to my mom, but because I've done the work to really look at this complicated relationship, it's easy to see that how that informed how I wanted to tell the story and what aspects of the story I wanted to bring out.
Yeah.
So that too was really healing for me.
Yeah.
It's not directly autobiographical by any means, but aspects of it feel very personal to me. And I think that it's important when choosing what you're going to work on next. Lin-Manuel said it too, like it has to be something you're passionate about or it's not worth it. And after title of show, a lot of people asked me if I was interested in coming on board, like as a producer or associate producer on their project. And ultimately by then, like I had learned one thing: any creative endeavor you take on, it's such a shit ton of work.
Yes.
So much work. It is blood, sweat, and tears.
You have to be passionate about it.
It's years of your life.
Yeah.
So you have to choose something that is personally meaningful to you. It doesn't have to be based in trauma. But having a personal relationship or a very personal interest in the material is what will
it has to light you up in some way. That's right.
The better we know ourselves, the better we'll know which creative projects we need to invest ourselves in.
I love it. I love it.
Shia told Days Magazine, I once felt that to learn from tragic experience is as much happiness as one can aspire to. I've since learned that there is happiness past that. Being ready to die for it is one part. Being ready to live for it is the other part. Boom. We wish you a good life, Shia. Happy trails on this therapeutic journey. Wow. And it is a journey.
I cannot wait to watch that movie. Did you? It sounds like it was powerful to watch it. Did you enjoy it?
I did. I really did. It's not a perfect film, but I did
Nothing
enjoy
is
it.
perfect.
Nothing's perfect, but I felt...
And we're glad it's not.
Yeah. I
fascinating.
Felt a lot of things.
Did you know all of this going into it?
I only knew that it was very autobiographical.
Got it.
And I was like, I'm interested.
I'm interested too.
Right? Because we always talk about like that's where the pain is a fruitful place to work creatively.
Anywhere where you have visceral physical response is a fruitful place to work. It also makes me want to go back and watch Buttholes again. I love
the Battle of Shaker Heights.
I bet we could catch that. I bet that's on one of the streaming services.
Shall we also do Transformers? Hey, fun fact. During his whole apology tour, hashtag I am sorry years, apparently he once, I don't know if it was Angelica or somewhere, they did a 20-hour screening of every Shia LaBeouf film, and he sat through them all with the audience.
That rings a bell. Yes, I do think I knew that.
Crazy.
That's a little piece of performance art too.
There we go.
Oh man,
Woo.
What an interesting spark.
I was jazzed by it. I just was like, and I'm sure there's a million more things.
I have to really sit and think on this. I want to think on. Of course, I want to see that film, but I also, as somebody, as you said, as somebody who has made a lot of work out of life experience, real lived experience, there's something fascinating about him making this work going into the room in the castle you're not supposed to go into, going into that room, having a therapeutic process through it, but also making creative work out of it, and then stepping into the role of his father. That is fascinating. I need to think more about that. I also completely think it's interesting that I have played your mother in your own writing. My peanut butter really is in your chocolate.
Oh, yes,
and your chocolate really is in my peanut butter.
Really is.
But it's an interesting thing because it helps me. I was thinking about this on the way over here. It helps me to understand you having a better understanding of the mother that you grew up with. It does.
A ditto.
It does.
Ditto.
Yeah.
Like watching you and your mom when she came over. And when was that? I don't know. Oh my God. Was it in the springtime? I can't even remember where we are right now.
Yeah. It helps. It helps to understand.
Yeah. Watching you guys cook and
helps you understand,
it
doesn't
was
it?
amazing. Yep.
Shia, we wish you the best.
Yep.
Oh, we hope that this put another bunch of sparks in your file. Listen, if there's a spark that you'd like us to explore, or if you've taken a spark and you fanned it into a tasty creative flame and you'd like to share that, won't you email us at thesparkfile@gmail.com or submit it through our website, thesparkfile.com.
We will even happily take your feedback, but you know the price of admission. First, you got to share a creative risk that you've taken recently.
And be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe, rate, 5-star review it. If you like this podcast, share it with people you love. If you didn't like it, we sincerely wish you the very best in your search for a podcast that brings you satisfaction.
If something tickles your fancy and gets your creative juices flowing, we're writing you a forever permission slip to make that thing that's been knocking at your door. It's your turn to take a spark and fan it into a flame.
You got to mix it. You got to high kicks it all along the watchtower and Jimi Hendrix it.
Oh my God. You got to take it and make it. Woo. That was awesome.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I wanna make or how I wanna be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the chief creative officer and chief marketing officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.